Thank you for joining us for today's You Create Yours Quick class. We're going to take a look at how you design charts and tables so that we can have a graphical display of our data. When we finish today, you're going to be able to do a number of useful things. You're going to be able to create a table and know some best practices for doing so. You're going to learn how to select non-continuous data, copy and paste that. You're going to learn how to create a bar graph. You'll also be able to label the X and Y axes. We'll add a graph title, and we'll also look at some basic aspects such as changing the colors of the bars, and we'll end by showing how to copy and paste our graphical displays into Word. You can download today's data set in the YouTube video description section. Go ahead, take a second, download that, get it opened in Excel, and we'll get started with the class. Now that you've downloaded your data set, let's take a look at what we want to do. The first thing that I always do when I'm going to work with a data set is I create a new sheet, because I do not want to alter the original data. I want to maintain the original data's integrity. So I'm going to come down here to the plus, click that, create a new sheet. I'm going to call this working. That's what I usually do, so that I know that this is where I'm working with the data. Come back over to sheet 1. That's not very descriptive, so I'm going to call this original, or sometimes I call it raw data. This is my unaltered original data. Now we need to start thinking about what pieces of information we want to summarize and develop into a table and a graphical display. In our case, we're going to use a bar chart. So I'm interested in who I purchased gifts for, the total amount I spent per person, and the number of gifts I bought each person. So make sure that you're on your original data set here, and I am. I need recipients. I'm going to grab these areas. I'm going to left click, hold, and get recipient. Store, I don't need that, but that's okay. I'm going to grab it anyway. And the price. Then I'm going to keep holding, and I'm going to encapsulate my entire data set. I'm going to right click, copy, come over and paste this in my working area. I'm going to use a shortcut key, Control V. Now if you want to see all this information, remember from a previous video, we know how to do that. I'm going to select each of these columns, come to where the mouse changes, double click, and it adjusts so that I can see all of my information. Now I'm going to begin by starting my table. So we know we want to have the name of the person. We'll call it total spent. And we'll do number of gifts. You know, I like to have all of my titles in bold, and we'll go ahead and get these all displayed. Now that we have the basic outline for our table, we need to start populating each of the table areas. The first thing we need to do is we need to generate a list of the people for which we have purchased gifts. In a previous lesson, we learned how to sort our data, so I'm going to real quickly grab our data set, come up to the ribbon to the editing group, select Sort and Filter, Custom Sort. Since I selected my headings for each of my columns, and notice here we have my data has headers selected, we can sort by the names of the columns. I want to sort by recipient, and A to Z order is fine with me. Click OK. Now we have an alphabetical list of the individuals for which we have bought gifts. Now, if I simply copied and pasted this list of names, we'd have people repeated, and we don't want that. We just want to know a summary of each person we've purchased, the total amount we've spent, and the number of gifts. So it is possible in Excel to select non-contiguous pieces of data. You can hold the Control key and use and click cells, so a left click. So I'm going to start here with Alexander. I'm holding Control, Amelia, Annabella, Brad, Katie, Jerry, Dave, Derek, Frederick, Grace, Heather, Jack, Jordan, Judy, Justin, Kevin, Penelope, Tom, and Victor. Now you can see here I have all of these non-contiguous pieces selected. I'm going to hold the Control key and hit C. Control C is a way you can copy. Now you see that these are animated around each of these. So I've copied all these, come over here to Name, hold the Control and hit V, Control V. Now I have my list of individuals for which I have purchased gifts. Now that we've developed our list of individuals for which we have purchased gifts, we need to figure out the total amount we've spent on each person. Now there are a number of ways to do this, but we're going to take a very easy, sort of basic approach in the beginning. There's some more advanced options and quicker options, such as using a pivot table, that we will discuss in a future lesson. So let's create us a column. We'll call it Sum. Go ahead and make that bold. And then we will come here and use the sum function. Alexander only got one gift, so we're okay there. Amelia, same thing, one gift. That works. Annabella got 2. Notice, since Bella got 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the last entry for Annabella. Click there, hit Sum, and then I'm going to select those 2 and then hit Enter. Brad had 3, so I'm going to go to the last entry for Brad, hit Sum, and be very careful to grab just those entries. Now you go ahead and do that, and we'll come back together once you have each summary for each individual. Now that you've finished calculating the total spent for each individual, I would check my work first. Let's use the auto sum function for both of these columns. Verify that it did grab as far as it should. It has. $2,963.29. We can drag this over to the other column, and it adds up to the same amount, so we've done what we needed to do there. Now we want to populate these values over to the table that we're developing. So we're going to select our non-contiguous data. Remember that we can do that by holding Control. Control C, that copies these data points. Over here, I'm going to show you, let's come up to the paste area on the ribbon. And what I want to do, since these are formulas calculating the totals, let's only paste the values. And here we see the amount we've spent on each person. You can clean this up a little bit if you want. Decrease the decimal to the hundredths place. You can make this become currency. And what I would do is center that as well. So here we have the total number, or the total spent per individual in this table. I would come in here and develop a sum or a total. Make this bold. Right adjust. Would use the sum function. It grabbed the data I wanted it to. Make that bold. And we're happy with that. Now the next thing we want to do is determine the number of gifts we spent per individual. This is a little bit tedious, and we're going to do this in a similar fashion that we did each of the totals. So we come through here and you're just going to have to look. Notice when you click here, we got 1 for Alexander, 1 for Amelia. So we'll come in here and we'll just enter this data, 1, 1. I would center these. It's just my personal preference. Now Annabella has 2. Notice when I grab Annabella's name and highlight more in one column, if you come down here, this counts for you. And this is the way I would do it. I would highlight the names and see how many. So Annabella had 2. Brad had 3. Katie 2. Go ahead and get the number of gifts and fill that table in, and we'll come back together. Now that you've populated the number of gifts per individual, you should always check your work. One way we can do this, remember, if we drag the columns, I'll come over and select all of the names. Let me see here, this is 46 individuals. So I could come over here and select all this, and notice when you have numbers, you get a count. There's 19 values. The sum, the total of those values is 46, and that equals the total number of gifts or entries we had here, 46. I'm going to go ahead and hit the summary function. Make that bold. And now we have a nice table that shows us the number of individuals for which we purchased gifts, the total amount we spent per individual, and the number of gifts we purchased for each individual. I want to give you a little bit of information about best practices on how to display a table. You want to limit your use of lines when you develop a table. What I do is I'm going to come in around here, select these, go to cell fill. I'm going to fill these as white. When you use lines in a table, you want to use only horizontal lines and as few as possible. You never want to use vertical lines. So I can go here and select this. Notice here we have the ability to give borders to our cells. Bottom border, put that in. Highlight here, bottom border. Put a border here. And then a border here to close out this cell. And voila, we have a good looking table, which we'll come back to and look at how we put this in a document, perhaps if we want to build a report, for example. We've developed a nice looking table and it provides us some good information. But let's take this one step further and develop a graph, a chart that shows us how this looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our headers, name and total spent, and all of the data associated with those, excluding the total. Because all I want to do is I want to develop a graphical display of the amount of money spent per individual. Once I've selected that data, come over to Insert tab, and then notice there's a Charts ribbon. And on the Charts ribbon, we have a number of available options. One thing you can click on is Recommended Charts. It takes a look at your data, and based on the types of information you have there, it gives you some suggestions. We're not going to do that today because I know what I want to do is a bar chart. So I hover over here, insert column or bar chart. If you click this down arrow, it gives you examples. As you hover over them, they will show you what each would look like. We're going to select simply this clustered column. Click, and here we go. I can click and drag this. I'll click and drag it below the table which the data is built on. And we can see here now each individual for which we purchased gifts and the total amount of money we spent on each individual. And it's clear to see that, well, we spent a lot of money on some people. Kevin, for example, $497.17. And other individuals, like Jack, a little under $12. Dave, a little under $13. Not so much. Now, one thing that we want to do when we develop a table is we want to make sure that we label the various elements. So notice here I have the table selected. We come up here, we're on the Chart Design tab now. And let's look at how we label our axes. This bar chart has two axes, the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, and the y-axis, which is the vertical axis. Come over here to Add Chart Element. When we click this, we see we have various options. What we want to do is come here to Axis Titles. We'll do the horizontal or the x-axis, and we will put this as name. Type in name, hit enter, and then we know that is name. Chart element, axis titles, come over to vertical, total, and we'll type in total amount spent. Hit enter, and now that is labeled. The other thing that we want to do, we come over to chart element, come here to chart title. You can get rid of it if you don't want one. I'm going to go ahead and give it a title. We'll call it Christmas spending per individual Christmas 2021. Hit enter, and there is our title. Now you may look at this and say, well, I know those are the names of the people and I don't want to label this axis. You can do that. There's a number of ways you can take it out. The simplest way would come here into the chart, click name, notice I've highlighted name, and click delete. And now that is gone and the chart adjusts. If you would like to make additional edits to this chart, maybe you don't like these to be blue, maybe you want them to be something else, you can click on this chart area. Notice it highlighted all of the columns. It brought us over to the chart design tab. There's many different options. You can hover over chart styles and change the style of the chart, or you can come over here to change colors, and you can change the color scheme associated with your chart. So maybe I think green is a little more festive. And very quickly, we have a green chart. Well, we've created a nice table and an excellent chart. The last thing that I want to show you is how to move these over into a program such as Word. Maybe you're developing a report that you want to hand out to someone, and you don't want to just display all of the raw data. If you want to do this, it's very easy. It's very typical to export these into Word. We formatted this table in a great way. Come over here. I'm going to open up Word. I'm going to go ahead and double-click blank document, and here we have a blank document. Come over here. Let's go ahead and grab the table. So I click and drag to highlight the table. Control-C to copy. Come over here. Now when I paste this into my Word document, I'm going to come over to paste this down arrow, and what I typically do is I paste as a picture. Click, paste as picture, and here this is uneditable, but it keeps the integrity of this particular element. And I do the same thing with the charts. So if I wanted to put the chart into my report, come over here, click the chart, Control-C to copy this, come over to Word, come over to paste the down arrow. I want to put it in as a picture, and there we go. We have this inserted into our Word document. Once you have these in these documents, you can transform them just by dragging. Maybe I want these to be side to side. I can drag this until it's small enough to fit up beside it. Center these. A number of things that you could do. But you can develop a nice report and see graphically, visually, very quickly. Kevin got the most money spent on him. Come over here, who got the most number of gifts? Well, Kevin also got the next number of gifts. Derek was close behind with 7. Although the amount of money spent on him wasn't as high as it was for Penelope, even though Penelope only received 3 gifts. Her gifts were more expensive. Well, thank you for joining me today for this edition of You Create Yours Quick class, where we took a nice look at how to create tables and charts and do some basic editing and importing and exporting of those aspects. If you found today's lesson useful and enjoyed yourself, give us a like or consider subscribing so that you can see our future material. Likewise, we'd love it if you give our website a visit at youcreateyours.com and take a look at the resources we have available on our website. Give us a shout out on our social media, and we look forward to interacting with you. Remember, recognizing that you are not where you want to be is the starting point to begin changing your life. Keep learning, and we'll see you next time.